we'll just jump in and just and pretty much don't have a conversation about these I mean there's a ton going on all the time, but I think in regards to what we do here, these three men who've all passed recently, or more alive than ever, and the impact they've had culturally within the church. There's so much to be said about it, but I was just like, yeah, I want to talk to Sam about this stuff because I feel like you've worked with a couple of them before directly, from what I gather and from what I know, and then just kind of the conversation around them right now. The conversation was kind of always there beforehand, and then like what's happening now that they are no longer with us here, like what that looks like, and then in the context of we work with a bunch of young men who are constantly looking for uh, men to emulate and to be like and for direction and guidance. And so I mean that's why you have these personalities like Andrew Tate and all these different other uh pretty destructive gentlemen. I don't even say gentlemen, but pretty destructive people out there that a lot of these young men are gravitating towards. So I know that was kind of a mouthful, but so that's kind of like the direction of what I want to talk about and kind of dive into. But before we get into all of it, what are I guess sort of your initial what's your experience with these three men, whether directly or indirectly? And these three men we're speaking of are John MacArthur, Charlie Kirk, and Dr. Voddie Baucham. So, what's your sort of direct connection or relation with these three men?
So out of the three of them, the only one that I've not, I guess, interacted with directly is actually Charlie Kirk. But I have a lot of close friends who are part of Turning Point USA. And, um, one, I mean, I've just been, praying for them and just in this very difficult time. But honestly, every single person I know at Turning Point USA is an exceptional person. Which speaks volumes of his leadership. So even though I didn't speak to him, I just knew that the kind of people that was working there, work out just on staff, that just through them, I knew that he was a man of integrity because these people are truly incredible people, very sincere people, very passionate people. And I would imagine that. And I mean, I didn't know much about him in his personal life. I've come to know more like everybody else. And it's just been incredible just to see the kind of man that he was, the kind of man that I hoped he was, but I just didn't know him just because I knew the people that he was with, at Turning Point. I seemed he was like that kind of person too, as their leader. And it's been affirmed even more than what I imagined he was. That's the kind of man he was, especially from what, his wife, Erica, just even seeing her, just seeing his leadership, um, through just her, what she was saying, it's quite incredible. I was saying to Henny, I'd be so blessed that, if I were to pass away, and I have no doubt that she would, because she's an amazing woman herself, but um, that man, if she could show the kind of resilience that his wife, Erica Kirk has, man, I know that not in a way to make me look good, but I just know that would mean that, wow, I did well as her husband. Um, but I had more interaction with John MacArthur and Voddie Baucham. Those two men really are just two of my heroes. And outside of my mom, I've always said those two men are my heroes in the faith, for so many reasons. And I was blessed that I had some small interaction with them. And honestly, but all of them were just encouraging me, just to keep going. And I can't tell you just how much that means to me. Where you know, John MacArthur has some very kind things to say about my writing, which is like, it's like, what? First of all, I exist, right? And then second of all, that you would say kind things about my writing, really? Wow. And then Vadi Bokum and I talked with him more, and I wrote an article where I mentioned this, where he sent me, the first thing he said to me was just an email. He just got my email. He took the time not just to read my articles, but took the time to find my email, send me an email, just encouraging me, saying that I'm not alone in the things that we care about. such as, issues of race, but even just talking about fatherlessness, something that he deeply cared about. And he inspired me on that issue. Him encouraging me on that blew my mind. And then he and I talking over the phone, um, just, really just talking about personal issues and him giving me wise counsel and me having the opportunity to tell him that, look, the things that I've been learning from you has been a real blessing for me. And I said that I'm encouraged by your life because you and I have a similar background of sorts of growing up in a home without a father. And when I see the kind of man that you have become, it tells me that maybe in a small way, maybe I have a hope, I have a chance to become like you. And anyway, sorry, I'm not, so yeah, very encouraging. And to see his humility in that way, it was, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So those were my interactions with John MacArthur and Voddie Baucham.
Yeah, what you're saying, which I love. You mentioned it a few times, being encouraged by these men, specifically, Voddie Baucham and John MacArthur, but across the board. And then the Erica's, as the encouragement of seeing that. That was been my experience watching them. Their sermons, their podcasts, their different interviews. I was always encouraged by what they had to share. That said, you're mentioning that, and it made me think of. I was personally encouraged by probably 99% of the stuff that I did watch and I did listen to and I did see. I know many, many Christians who would not use encourage and these three men's name in the same sentence. They would use what I've heard regularly is how offended they are by things they have said, by things they have shared, things they have taught, things that they express in different, sermons, podcast interviews, that sort of thing. So I have a lot to say about that, but I want to hear, like, why do you think, just in my circles, I mean, and I'm sure you've heard much of it over the years, and more so recently, I'm sure just, people are just going wild with this, but what do you think it is? I have some theories of my own, but what do you think it is that so many believers, Christians, not the non-Christian, I kind of, that makes a lot of sense. I get that. That makes a lot more sense. But why so many believers find these three men so incredibly offensive?
Sometimes when we think of the word offensive, we immediately assume that means that other person, that the person who's accused of being offensive was a bad person. But I would say the most offensive person to ever live is Jesus Christ. He's the most offensive person to ever live, and that's why they crucified him. Guys, guess what? They didn't crucify him because he was so inoffensive. No, they crucified him because he was offensive. And yet we know he's also righteous and sinless. He should be the least offensive person. But because we are sinful, he therefore is offensive to us because he's revealing things about us that we don't like. And I'm not suggesting that Charlie Kirk, Voddie Baucham, John MacArthur are Jesus Christ. Of course not. However, even as a Christian, the most offensive thing about my day is when I read my Bible. You know what I mean? I'm getting slapped left and right. And I always say the book of Proverbs. Oh man, I hate. I love that book, but I hate reading that book because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm too often the foolish man, not the wise man. And I think in a similar sense, a lot of people, even Christians, are offended by these men because they spoke truth. And the truth is offensive sometimes to us. It just is. Voddie Baucham definitely offended me. John MacArthur offended me. Charlie Kirk sometimes offended me. Less so him, but Voddie Baucham, John MacArthur, they definitely offended me. But it was because you need to be offended to grow. You need to be offended to learn truth. And I'll tell you, my mom is probably the most offensive person in my life. And that's why she's my hero, because she tells me the truth. She tells me, hey, this is what you need to stop doing. And it always offends me. Well, not always, but most of the time. Because we don't want to hear anything bad about us. So when Voddie Baucham would talk about how you should raise your kids, sometimes we get offended by it because We're not raising the kids the way that we should be, the way we should be raising them. When he'll talk about what it means to be a good man, to be a good father, it'd be offensive because we're maybe not doing exactly what we should be doing. Same thing with John MacArthur. Now, these men are sinful men. So have they said sinful things? Possibly. Well, not possibly, probably. They definitely have. But from what people are saying about them, it's not the sinful things about them that they're really complaining about. It's, I would say, the righteous things. And unfortunately, it's because we are sinful. So sometimes righteous things offends us.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. What I think too, what I hear from a lot of people when they've been brought up in discussion, and not just recently, but over the years, someone will walk in, it's like, what are you listening to? It's like, a MacArthur sermon. Oh, you listen to that guy? Like, oh, yes, I do. It's like, oh, okay. And then the conversation would begin, and oftentimes it's like, well, yeah, I get it. I get what he's saying is true, but it's just the way he says things. The way he shares, like, does he have to be so mean? And I'm like, so then we would listen to some of these clips together. I'm like, well, tell me what's mean about this. I mean, I guess he's not as emotive in some areas, or it's a little bit more monotone, so that sounds mean, maybe. But what I would hear a lot about these men, or with Voddie, it was he's a little too aggressive, and definitely with Charlie Kirk. I mean, the guy's just shouting, like he's just rude. He's just rude. So it's oftentimes like it's not the content that's offensive, but because of the delivery, they don't even get to the content. It's not until like you sort of force them to sit and go, tell me what's so offensive about, any of these three men sharing about how marriage is beautiful. And it's like, well, I didn't know that that's what they were talking about. I guess if they could just change the way they're sharing it, maybe I'd hear it. And so that's what I would hear often. And then now there's a few people that have come around. And it's like, when I took the time to listen to more than a 45-second clip where I just thought he was shouting at someone. And now the concept of it is, makes more sense. But can you speak to that? Because I get that. Then
That's very, very helpful. I think whenever we're hearing something difficult, we don't want it to be said plainly. These are men that talk about difficult things, and they never beat around the bush. And honestly, we're used to a culture where people always want to let you down easy. It's like you ask out a girl, hey, like you want to go out, and they'll say all the nice things about you. They'll say all the best things. Oh, Samuel, you're so handsome. They never told me that, but they'll say, you're so this, you're so this, you're so good at all that, whatever. And then finally they'll say, but I'm not into you in that way. Our culture likes, they're so used to, before people tell you difficult things, they want to dress it up in the best package possible. These men went straight to the point. And today, for a lot of us, that offends us, right? And look, they're all sinful people. So there's sometimes, I'm said, they all were sinful people. So sometimes they could have said things, I'm sure, in a better way. Of course, all of us could do that. But generally speaking, I think a lot of the complaints from what I've heard as well, too, was, yes, their delivery. And it's because we're used to people, I think, usually dressing it up in all the niceness before they would go ahead and say it. Because I can tell you again, I never spoke to Charlie Kirk, but I can tell you with personal experience, truly, the number one thing that I told people that I thought for myself, even as someone who did not consider Voddie Baucham or John MacArthur to be a mean person, the one thing that I truly, truly thought, again, I'm being very sincere here, as an individual, was I couldn't believe how humble and gentle these men were. I'll tell you something. When I talked to Voddie Baucham, I had to seek his wisdom over something. I'll tell you some failures of mine, some things that I was really struggling. I was going through a process at the time that was a result of my failures, just frankly, my sins that had just kind of blown up in other ways and everything else, not to seek his wisdom. And I'm like, this is Voddie Baucham. This is Voddie Baucham. Man, he is going to tear into me. Now, again, I wouldn't think he'd be wrong into even doing that. But I thought to myself, oh, he's going to be tough on me, and I just got to suck it up and take it because it'd be for my good. Instead, he told me the truth. It was not different from how he would say from the pulpit. But from the pulpit, he's speaking to a big crowd, right? And then with me as an individual, he sees one soul coming to him and he's speaking to my soul. And I thought to myself, wow, this man is so gentle. He was plain spoken, but gentle. Because now I wasn't just looking at a man from the screen or, on the pulpit. I'm really talking to him. He's thinking of me, not a crowd, not the topic. He's just talking to me. And I saw more of who he was than I probably would from just a pulpit or, at a conference. So I think that's one of these things, right? And this people, again, same thing with John MacArthur, that oftentimes we will have our own biases about certain people because of the environment. And also just because of the fact that I think we are, yeah, we live in a culture that I think we don't appreciate, in my opinion, men who are just straightforward in that way. And look, here's the reality. We don't know Jesus' tone and how he spoke. We read his words and we all have our preconceived notions about how he spoke. But I can tell you, there are times where we know. I mean, he was very, very gentle, of course. But forget how he would speak to the disciples. Forget how he would speak to people who would come to him with questions. If all you saw of Jesus was him seeing the ungodliness at the temple, where he's driving people away, right, because he's righteously angry at how they're offending God, you would think, wow, this person was mean. But of course he's not mean. He was just doing what was right at the time for a godly man to do. And sometimes in a different environment, the godly thing to do is to hear the words of a sinner and gently call them to repentance, or sometimes like when Peter, essentially was rebuking Christ for wanting to be crucified. It was right for Christ to say, oh man, what did he say to Peter in rebuke? He said, get behind me, Satan. Right now, that can say, whoa, you called him Satan, but that's Jesus saying it. Right. So I think sometimes, again, these men are not Jesus Christ, right? They fall short just like all of us. But I think a lot of times, the same way we might say that they're not speaking with grace, we are also not listening with grace as well.
Yeah, and I think as you're saying all of that, I'm thinking that, one of the three things I wanted to kind of focus on is the compassion, clarity, and courage of these three men. I mean, because for me, growing up in a single parent home without a father, there's different men that have been a part of my life that have mentored and helped guide me. But then also with the dawn of the new age of technology and podcasts and sermons being available and all these kinds of things online, I'm one of these people who 10, 15 years ago got on the internet and thought, like, let me see if I can find some of these teachers and preachers and public figures that are out there sharing and speaking some truth. And these are three men. Charlie Kirk was a little bit later. He's younger. I'm kind of old. But MacArthur and Voddie had come across, a while back and started to listen to quite a bit of their stuff. And then Charlie Kirk got more familiar with about 5 years ago because of the demographic that we work with here in the college age and that sort of thing. So I got familiar with his stuff. But yeah, I think as you're sharing that, I'm also thinking of the woman caught in adultery, where Christ is the compassion that he's showing this woman, the clarity that he's bringing to her sin, and the courage to speak to these people and say, you without sin, cast the first stone. I mean, all those things sort of combined in that one scenario. And yes, these men are not Christ. We all know that, but that was their aim, to be like him and to be a reflection of who Christ is. And I think did a pretty excellent job at doing that. And so for me, it's always interesting. I think if we were there and we were the people ready to stone the woman caught in adultery, what sort of description would we use towards Christ? Oh, his tone, the way he said it, the way he called us out, it was a little offensive. Like he should have done that in front of everyone. He should have pulled us aside one by one and said, hey, do you really want to throw the stone? Hey, it's like, all the different, or, or he shouldn't have been so direct with her, so clear with her about go and sin no more. That's a little offensive. He doesn't know her struggles. And, he should have maybe brought her to the side and had some therapy and some counseling with her, talked it out. That's the culture we live in. And not that there's anything wrong with therapy and counseling and one-on-ones and all that sort of thing. But I just think about that often when I'm having these discussions with people, and it's like, so how could have perfectly executed this situation or this scenario or this thing, especially when you understand the urgency of what Christ has called us to. And, and so I think the urgency is there. It's not that it makes an excuse for delivery or tone, but it definitely, if the understanding the urgency is what is driving the intent and that's the motivation, then I think it's like, how do we, yeah, like you just said, the grace that we are extending when we are listening, when we are hearing people share and speak. And so that's just what I think of when I think of these three men.
And you said it a lot better than I did. With the key word urgency. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I can tell you, well, when you said that, it made me think of something. When my children, especially my oldest, he's a toddler, there are times where like the neighbors might hear me, and without knowing what I'm saying or the context, they might think, "Wow, this guy he's yelling at his son." No, maybe he's about to put his hand in the oven, and I'm like, Solomon, right? Because I'm like, there's an urgency there. So I'm not going to say, my dear child, would you, no, it's Solomon because of love, because I love him. I don't want him to hurt himself. Right. So these men, you're exactly right. They spoke with urgency. When I think of them, the passion they had for the gospel, for the glory of God, and they had an urgency that most of us did not, which is what made them great men, right? Great men are men who are able to discern urgent times in ways that maybe we do not. And I think that was true for John MacArthur for sure, and also true for Voddie Baucham, and then true for Charlie Kirk also when it came to his arena as well too. So yeah, that's really well said. They just had the urgency in how they were addressing these issues.
Yeah, and I mentioned, I say urgency, and I mentioned the compassion, the clarity, and the courage, because I think most the conversations I've had where there's been pushback and there's offense, they would not describe these men as men who are compassionate, who love people. They would describe them as people who hate people. It's a hate speech. It's what they're saying is very hateful. The tone of it, it's very assertive. It's not loving. And I just think, when Jesus tells the woman, go and sin no more, I mean, that's one of the most compassionate things you could ever say to someone. But again, I think depending on who's hearing it and how they're hearing it and their own issues, that they're filtering it through that, and it becomes offensive. You're telling me to stop doing the things I love to do. Like, who do you think you are? Like, you're offending me. Don't talk to me that way. You're not my mom. You're not my dad. Who do you think you are? You're not the boss of me. I'm just thinking the kids I work with, but that's, and so when I think of them, I remember seeing a clip. I forgot exactly, but the clip is MacArthur talking to a young lady, and he does these Q&A sessions in his church. I'm sure you've seen many of them. You may have even been a part of some of them, but this young lady gets up and she begins to weep, and she's sharing about how does she know if she's saved, and she believes she's saved and she's received salvation, and she's beginning to weep, and the compassion that in his response. And he started off with, you're asking that question is a sign of salvation, is a sign of use part. Um, Talk about compassion. I mean, a person without compassion, without the clarity and the courage to speak to that, might say, but along the lines of, I don't know if you're saved. And yeah, that's a good question. You should probably figure it like that. You know what I mean? And so when I remember watching that clip, and I was just like in tears after, and I thought, how can anyone watch this and say this man doesn't care about people? He's just a meanie. And it's just like so strange to me.
It's the fascinating thing about the word compassion, or just the idea of compassion. We think compassion is always like if you agree with something, but that's not compassion. You can't separate love from compassion. And the Bible has a very specific definition of love. The Bible says that love does not rejoice at wrongdoing, right? It rejoices with the truth. The truth. So when you lie to someone, that's not compassion. And I think there's so many people who are preachers who frankly, sadly, have lied to a lot of people. There are some people, say, for example, that same scenario that you mentioned, say a woman is, crying, saying, I don't know if I'm a Christian. What do I do? Some people will say, oh, well, if you say you are a Christian, then you're definitely a Christian. That's it. So let me hug you. And we'll think, wow, what a compassionate person. No. Thinking you are a Christian doesn't make you a Christian, right? There are other things. And you said, John MacArthur just, talked about the signs and everything else. And that's true compassion. So, and on top of that, Jesus, I think this is correct. I'm just my memory's might be off here, but there was a man called the rich young ruler. That's how the Bible describes this person. Rich young ruler who came to him saying, Jesus, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus also told him, here's what you should do. Do this, do that, do that. Really, what the point was, because he was coming with pride. He thought, I've accomplished, I've obeyed all the 10 commandments and everything. Jesus says, Jesus knowing his heart said, then go sell everything. Because Jesus knows that really he's a greedy, prideful person. And then it says that the man walked away sad. And then I believe it says that Jesus had compassion on him. He didn't tell him what he wanted to hear at all, but he had compassion for him because that man was not, he knew what Christ was saying. He just did not want to follow it. Because what the gospel, Jesus Christ says that the way to salvation is narrow, right? And with to destruction is a wide gate. And in fact, people who heard Jesus, they said, this is a hard saying. When it came to the gospel, say, this is a hard saying. Who can follow it? This is too hard. It's like, hey, like you say you are, you're God and you're the Messiah or you're this, but hey, what you're saying is really difficult. Yeah. What Christ calls us to is a life of sacrifice and total obedience to him. Is that what saves us? No, we're saved by trusting in Jesus Christ, by truly believing him. But we know we really trust in him based on how we act in response to his gospel, to his grace and mercy towards us. But a lot of people who have a misconstrued a view of compassion might even accuse Christ of not being compassionate. In fact, people do say that, right? People do say, how can a truly loving God send people to hell? They're really saying God is not compassionate. Why? Because he tells the truth. Why? Because he says that he will not tolerate sin. So a lot of people, when they're saying that these men lack compassion, they're really saying that these men are telling the truth. Because I will tell you, I'd rather somebody tell me the truth about my soul, the truth about my sins, so that they can rescue me from the wrath of God. And that's what Voddie Baucham and John MacArthur definitely did. They didn't lie to me at all. Before them, I was listening to preachers who never told me I was doing anything wrong. They said, man, this is your best life now. I think you get that reference. Everything is going very well for you. Everything is great. The only thing you're missing is just a little bit of God. That's it. That's all you're missing. That's all they would say. That wasn't compassion. They were lying to me because everything was wrong with me. I needed the grace of God, right? And that's how I get true joy. I wasn't very happy before, right? But now I have true joy because I know, wow, my biggest issues have been addressed, my sins, right? So it's hard to hear that, yeah, you are a sinner. But man, it's even better to hear that you are a sinner that's been forgiven by God, right? That's true compassion. And I think, again, our world, we have a very bad, awful view of compassion, which only leads us away from true compassion.
Yeah, and I want to kind of move into the clarity of things, but as you're saying that, it's a phrase I hear often, and I'm sure you hear it often, as your conscience permits. And oftentimes I think it's wrapped up with combination with being compassionate towards someone, and then you sort of kind of almost rationalize and justify. And then there's this phrase that follows, as your conscience permits, and sort of where you are and where God has you. And so because of what I have found in my experience, oftentimes the thing that I was mentioning earlier, compassion, clarity, and the courage, there's no clarity when it just kind of seeps into, you don't really love someone, you're not really truly being compassionate, and you're leaving it with that as your conscience permits, and it's sort of this sort of hazy, great faith. And as you mentioned, pastors speaking into your life and being like, living your best life ever. I don't know how many times different variations of that I've heard. And it's oftentimes what the phrase as your conscience permits. And then I would walk away and like, well, what does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. I have no clarity. I'm more confused because my conscience is a mess right now. And it's saying it's not really stripping me of this sin. And so my conscience is permitting some sin that's not good. It's not it's not something I should be doing, but because I wasn't, you know, really loved and there wasn't compassion, uh, there wasn't real clarity and the courage to speak to the sin and speak to the fear that needed to be addressed. Um, I'm thinking of the scripture too, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. I think if you're not loving God with all your heart, mind, strength, the clarity to love your neighbor as yourself is just not there. And so when I'm saying that just to then kind of segue into the clarity of these men. I mean, I was rarely ever like done watching a sermon, listening to a podcast and confused. I knew what I had to do. I knew what the next steps were. I knew it's very clear what had to happen personally, within my family, within my community, just whatever the things, that they were teaching on. And so oftentimes when there isn't true compassion, you don't really love someone. Like I just mentioned, that there's just so much confusion. And I think these men, there was nothing, I mean, probably not perfectly, but 99% of the time, you were not confused about the thing they were speaking on.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's such an important point. When you are a direct person, by direct, I don't mean like you're mean or like uncaring. No, just direct, that you speak plainly. It is. It's, I've tried very hard with my speaking and writing to be extremely plain spoken. I actually work rigorously to make sure I get rid of all the fluff. I just want to get straight to the point. One, I never know how much time I have in my life. I don't want to beat around the bush. I just want to, especially with just the untimely deaths of, untimely from our perspective, Voddie Baucham and Charlie Kirk, right? John MacArthur lived a long, life. Of course, we wish, that death didn't exist, all right? But at the same time, I know that it's a bit different for him. Um, but I want to make the best use of my time. And that includes just making sure that I say everything I want to say in a timely fashion. But also, I remember when I would ask people questions as a young person, especially. It was usually men. I always remember, it always bothered me how men would dance around telling me what the questions that I had for them. It always bothered me because I'm like, it feels like you are a salesman, that you're not telling me the truth. But worse than that, I always knew that the things I remember most from the conversations, whenever somebody wanted to tell me something that I didn't want to hear, but they would tell me 9 things that were great about me before they would tell me the one thing that was bad about me. Guess what I remember most, right? Do you think, what would I remember most from the conversations? All the 9 things that were great about me, not the one thing. Because I rather think about those things than the one thing. Of course, right? We are all naturally selfish people who wants to think about that something about them isn't perfect. We all want to dwell on all those great things. So normally I'd focus on all the great things about me. And there's times where certain people need that encouragement of knowing, there's a time where people just want, like I want to remind them of just how how much of a blessing they are, right? All the great things about them. And there's times where people who think too much about how great they are need to remember, like, there's some things about you that you need to work on. And if I want that to be their biggest focus, I don't want to dance around the bush. I want to beat around the bush. That's what you're supposed to say. Yeah. um, just go straight to the point in a loving way, but straight to the point. And yes, imagine if the Bible was not clear, if God was beating around the bush, right? Like, no, he's straight to the point, straight to the point. The Apostle Paul, straight to the point. Moses, straight to the point. John the Baptist, he was called mean. That's why they cut off his head. Straight to the point. All the prophets, all the apostles, straight to the point. because they wanted to be clear. They wanted to be understood, right? And the funny thing is, in writing, one of the first things they teach you in good writing is you need to get rid of excess words, right? You don't need that. Just go. So for example, instead of saying, I am very sorry, they'll say good writing is, I am sorry, right? All those things, 'cause you don't need very there, right? And because they recognize that those things can be distractions to really being able to get to the point. And that's what, that's clarity. And these men, because they were not, again, beating around the bush, and they were just saying what had to be said in plain spoken words, they were clear. And this is also about Voddie Baucham, especially, and John MacArthur. I think it's so important because if you think about the generations they've reached, John MacArthur especially reached like what, 5 different generations? His ministry was from the 1960s till 2005, right? That's just like what, 60 years of ministry? If he was not clear, there's no way he could reach out so many people. And not just that, his biggest audience actually are not Americans. It's actually around the world. He's very popular in the Latino world, in Africa, in Asia. And these are places that have a different ways of communication. They're not quite as, they're just straight to the point, at least from my experience. And he would not be able to reach, in my opinion, the kinds of people he was able to reach, especially with language barriers, if he wasn't straight to the point. And Voddie Baucham was the same way. He was the same person he was in America, and then also the same person when he went to Zambia to do ministry there for 10 years, right? Because I think when you're clear, it always means that you are plain spoken, in my view. And when you're plain spoken, you're able to reach more people. So I mean, again, I think you see that in the impact just worldwide, including Charlie Kirk too. Charlie Kirk, people call him mean, but he wasn't mean at all. Like, actually, one of the things I really like appreciate about him was that there's times, I think there were times where he had to be tough, not mean at all. There's never time to be mean. Times where he had to be a bit more firm on certain things, and times where he had to be more tender. And I think he was very good at that. Again, he wasn't perfect at all. I mean, I am not. Nobody is, except for Christ. But yeah, I think they were very clear, and that's one of the reasons why they've been blessed. Blessed so many people. But a lot of times, people who are not, who do not have clarity, their reach is usually a lot shorter.
Yeah, and clarity too. I think people think other people are. You're saying clarity because you want to sort of justify someone being mean, but I think in my experience too, like you were mentioning, when men would speak into my life, and the men I could tell who actually cared about me were able to speak clearly in ways that called me out, but also I believed and trusted them when they also were encouraging me. I think you'll find men who don't actually love people and don't actually love you, and when their speech is unclear, you don't actually even trust when they are encouraging you. You don't trust either.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
you know what I mean? So it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times someone has said, "Hey Frank, hey Frankie, great job," and it's like, "Okay, cool, thanks." Yeah, it's like you don't really believe them. Like, yeah,
Exactly.
you're one of those people. I've spoken to you before. I know where you stand on many views, and right now you're trying to be encouraging, but I don't trust your encouragement, nor do I trust your correction, because there's something really off. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, when my mom says good things about me, oh, I cherish that. I cherish it. I never doubt it. And she's a very good woman. She's my hero. But I say that because, oh, she will point out my failures, and I believe her because she's balanced, right? She's, uh, whenever we can tell that somebody cares more about us liking them than them tell us things we don't want to hear, we don't trust them because we know you just want me to like you. That's it. So then, yeah, when you do say good job, it's like, yeah, whatever. Of course you're gonna say that because you want me to like you. But if I know you just care about telling me the truth, then that means I can trust you. That whatever it is, even though I may not like it, even though it might offend me for that time, I know you're telling me the truth. You're telling me what you really believe, and that's more valuable than anything, right? That's more valuable than it. That's why the Bible says that, what is it? Oh man, the wounds of a friend. I'm forgetting
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
yeah, are faithful. There you go.
Yeah.
But then, because you know that, man, yeah, it hurts. It's a wound, man. It's an open wound. It hurts. But man, it's because
Yeah.
that's what I needed. This is a good friend. This is God who's saying it. This is the word of God. If God is saying, if somebody hurts you, but it's because they love you, they're telling the truth that you don't want to hear, that's not mean at all. That's not mean. Satan is the one person. The Bible says that he appears to us as an angel of light. He comes and everything is okay. Everything about you is amazing. That's what Satan wants you to hear. But God wants you to know that everything with you is not okay. That you have a lot of, that you made in his image, so you have a lot of value, but you're also a sinner. And by knowing that, you can truly have joy in him. So yeah, I think the way you said is very, very true.
Yeah. No, I love the people I trust the most are the ones that have called me out the most. It's like, okay, so that when they are encouraging, I take it to heart. But it's those other people that are like, it's like, oh, okay, all right, thanks for the words. What do you need? What do you need?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
respond with, and then it's like, Frankie, why are you being so mean right now? It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the kind words. Well, what do you need? Like, seriously, what's happening? But no, so and then all that, and sorry, there's a lot of, I'm thinking of the kids we work with because it's so funny the young people we work with here, the seasons and the relationships we have with these kids. There's times where it's like, man, Mr. Frankie, you just be hating on me. You jealous of me, or it's just like, trust me, I am not jealous of you at all. I'm not hating on you. I'm
Yeah,
telling you this because we love you, because you're acting like a fool. You need to stop. But it's so funny because you see, there's some of these kids we have known. When I say kids, they're now under 20s, but we met them when they were 10,
yeah,
12 years old. But I'm still talking to them. They're still texting me. They're still calling me, Mr. Frankie, what do you think about this, Mr. Frankie? Because they know that they're going to get some truth because they're loved. So it's going to be
yeah,
some clarity, some direct
yeah,
words spoken to them.
yeah,
And it's not going to be a bunch of fluff, you know.
yeah,
And so I know from my personal experience, same thing. The men that I really reach out to and want to hear from, it's not the men who are just full of a bunch of positives,
yeah,
and that sort of thing. But and not we love encouraging words, but we want the truth,
yeah.
or than we want.
Of course.
And the truth is encouraging, whether it's calling you out or lifting you up, and recognizing some of these good things that have happened. But
Yes.
all that to say, leading to the last part of this is the courage. I think you can love, you can have. I know for me, I've had experiences where there's compassion. It's clear what needs to be said or what needs to be done, but I get afraid and I don't have the courage to act on that, to do what God has called me to. I know I've been in scenarios and situations, especially with the work we do here. And sometimes I've been in spaces where there's city and government officials, or there's donors or that sort of thing, and I get afraid. What if I say something that's going to offend these people? Or I know it's going to offend some of these people, and we're going to lose support, or we're going to lose the engagement. And so I get afraid, and I don't have the courage to do that. These men, I'm sure they had experiences like that.
Yeah.
Everyone has a learning curve. It looks like these men learned it a lot quicker, a lot sooner than most of us. But what would you say as far as just that's what I gathered just from watching them, that there was this level of courage that was rooted in their love, love of Christ and being redeemed, and then loving their neighbor as themselves and having the compassion, the clarity, and then the courage to speak to the individual or to the groups or to the masses. Um, what's your experience or sort of your take on the courage of these men?
Yeah. That's that is more than anything, what I remember most about these 3 men is their courage. No doubt about it. With Charlie Kirk, he remember he I mean, I think he was there. He was there when Donald Trump was nearly assassinated. We know that he had a lot of death threats. He wore bulletproof vest. He was told apparently on that day that some people were like concerned because of just they weren't sure about security and everything. And yeah, he did it anyway. He did it anyway. Um, I mean, with Voddie Baucham, I know he's had a lot of people, because of some of the things that he would say, he lost some opportunities for sure, and people that he was close to who ended up just kind of moving away from him. Similar thing with John MacArthur as well, and then also just in 2020 with what was going on with the lockdowns, even at his old age, dealing with health issues, he said he has to be in church, and he was willing to take on I laugh about it because it's so John MacArthur. He was willing to take on the governor of California, right? And he actually ended up winning the case. He won the case, even when many believers were saying, "Oh, here's John MacArthur again, causing trouble and all that." But God blessed his courage. So these men but it's not even just on the public level. One of the things that I think I try to keep in mind is just private courage. Private courage is just integrity. Because one of the things I think that happens with a lot of people, when you're by yourself, if you are not being courageous over certain things in private, on a public level, you're not going to have the confidence. It seems to me that in private, they were who they said they were publicly, which gave them the confidence, the courage to keep on going, to persevere. Because I think a lot of times, if you lack confidence in how you're perceived by people, it will affect the things you're willing to say. They really believed in the things they really believed in the things they were saying. Therefore, they were able to continue. If you don't really believe what you're saying, if who you are in private is not who you are in public, you're going to be more likely to sway over time or on certain things because you want to keep your audience. But if if you know you're being really sincere, you will continue to overcome on some challenges. So I think their courage, from what I just know of these men, is that they weren't just talking about cultural stuff. They cared about fighting sin. They cared about overcoming their own sins. And I think honestly, that's the most courageous thing we can do, right? It's when your flesh, when Satan, when other people are tempting you towards sin and you say no. That is the most powerful thing anyone can do. And I think if you're living that kind of godly life, it will give you the strength to say godly things in public and to have the integrity to keep on, and the courage to keep on going, right? So I think courage really starts not on a public level, but on a private level. And I think that's why they all will be remembered for just a courageous life.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that. It starts it starts kind of privately and with yourself. And then, these men were all married and had wives and children. And you see it in, like you mentioned, Erica earlier, and John MacArthur's son, and his children, his son spoke at his memorial, and I watched all of that. And then Voddie and his family and his children and his wife. But you see it there. And I think as you're saying that, I'm thinking how challenging it is for us, just for ourselves, to have the courage to address who we are and see who we are for all of its sin and all of that. And then from there, when you are married or have children, those are some of the most difficult conversations and relationships to work through. And the courage to speak sincerely and honestly and compassionately with your spouse, with clarity, with children, those can be incredibly challenging. But if you can't do that there first, between you and Christ, and then with your family, and then beyond, and so that's what I gathered from, again, I've never met these men, but from their sermons and their interviews and their podcasts, that's what I gathered from them.
Yeah.
The last several years that I've been watching, listening, and learning from them, that I can trust that this isn't just a bunch of stuff that they're saying just for the sake of being, salacious or for being offensive or making headlines. It was because they actually believe this stuff. And it's from what I gathered from their family members and those around them who had spoken at different points over the years, not just after they passed, but at different points in different teachings and podcasts and those sorts of things. I gather these men are the real deal at home,
Yeah.
in their personal lives, And what we're seeing is a reflection of that. It's not a reaction to the culture and to all of that, although those are things that they're addressing. But that compassion, that clarity, and that courage is not a reaction to those things, but a byproduct of who they are personally, and then who they are immediately. So I love that you said that, because that's incredibly encouraging. And I think that's one of the things that, so, to circle around to like kind of what we do here and the young men and women that we work with, I'm always encouraging them to go and I'll send them different video links. So I've sent different, MacArthur's different interviews, some of the young people, especially the teenagers and the young adults here, just to kind of listen to them and to hear from other people, that always hearing from me, yelling at them and that kind of thing. But what would you say to some of these young people out there, like the young people, like the ones we serve, like us, like who grew up in a broken home without a father, who are looking for men to encourage them, to challenge them, to speak clearly and plainly, but with love and compassion and with some courage and boldness? What would you say to these young people who are kind of hesitant? Because there's still a lot of young people out there that are like, no, I heard these guys are tripping and they just be hating on people, and they're just mean and they're rude and offensive. What would you encourage them with, who are still kind of these young men and young women who are on the fence about these three specifically?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, to me, I referenced it earlier, but I think the hope that someone like Voddie Baucham gives to people like us. I couldn't believe when I started to learn about him that he grew up in a fatherless home. I was like, no way. But here's a man who was raised by a single mom, a very big, tall man, right? I've met him, he's bigger than me. He is tall, and he is, he has muscle, and just raised by his mom, and who is passionate yet gentle, tough, tender. And I think to the kind of life that he's lived, and he adopted I think 7 children, because, he is passionate about, because of his upbringing, really becoming a father to fatherless men, which has really impacted me. And I want to emulate that in the future. That and look at his life. Yeah, it's sad that he's passed away, but man, people will miss him. People who've never met him will miss him. And here is a man that his father did not want. Yet how many more people wish that he was alive? And I think that's a great, great story. And that can be true of us, that we can live a life that no matter what has happened with our fathers, or we can live such a great life that, man, we can leave behind a great legacy of people saying, man, his life really mattered. His life really, really blessed us. And to me, I've said this many times, but every life is great. Every success story is great, but it's always so much more powerful when it came out of a difficult scenario, right? That's what, I love superheroes, and every superhero, I look at Batman. Batman lost his parents, right? And that has been a big part. Every superhero, Superman, who is my favorite, he lost his entire world, his entire planet, right? It's because every real hero comes out of challenges and trials. So, Voddie Baucham, to me, I think about that a lot with him. But in terms of people hesitating to listen to these men because of the perceptions about some of them, I think of, I've been teaching now. I've been teaching just very, very young students. And there's a student who's the most difficult. There's a student who had a similar background as us, and I've had to be tough on him than all the other students. I've had to be, because I see a lot of me in him. And I'm telling you, there are times where I'm like, man, does he think I don't like him? He's actually maybe my favorite. But I'm like, I have to be tough on him. But does he think I don't like him? And then one day, it was a Friday, and a Monday was Labor Day. So I told him that there'll be no school. And I will never forget what he said. When I said that, he looked up, he was like, but Mr. Say, that means we won't get to see you. I'm like, what? You want to see me? You're always missing recess because of me. Like, I'm always like really on you all the time. I spent half of the class really just addressing him. And I thought he might think I don't like him, but he knows the reason why I'm tough on him is because I deeply care about him. And he has great potential. He really does. All of that to say that a lot of us have come from backgrounds where, frankly, let's, if we're honest, we know that we don't want people. We may struggle with it because sometimes we want to be caught all the time. We want to hear things. That's all of us. We all want to hear. My wife, sometimes she says bad things about me. I'm like, oh, leave me alone. But then great things. Oh yeah. Tell me more. Tell me more. We're all like that, right? But at the core, we know that true love. That's the reason why fatherlessness is such a powerful issue. Is because fathers are the best at being able to tell us the hard things, right? They're really the ones that we need to hear, especially when you're a young man or young woman, when your father says, look, listen to me, son, listen to me, daughter, right? And it's hard things. We know it's coming from a voice of a man that loves us. And I would say to these about, Charlie Kirk, John MacArthur, Voddie Baucham, they say difficult things, but they're coming from a loving place. And also, honestly, John MacArthur, Voddie Baucham, especially since they're older, they're father figures, right? It's hard, but it's kind of dragging up. I'll say this. I remember when I was very young, my mom and I were having an argument, and I yelled very loudly, "I wish my dad was here." And my mom gently came to me and said, "If he was here, he would be tougher on you than I am." I would never forget that. But that's because that's what I would need. I would need that. So let's remember that the most important things and when it comes to fatherlessness, the most important thing we would need the most is the men who are willing to tell us the things we don't want to hear. We know that. That's why a lot of us struggle with certain things sometimes, is because we don't have a man in our lives that's told us the things that we don't want to hear, but we need to hear. And I think that's what Charlie Kirk, Voddie Baucham, John MacArthur have done. And we can go to them and listen to them, learn from them, and live exemplary lives like them as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you just said. That I'm going to paraphrase it real quickly, but like that there's a sincere love that these men truly do love. And so I think, yeah, I would just kind of echo encouraging these young people that if you're looking, especially young people from broken homes with absent fathers or broken relationships with their fathers, if you're looking, and a lot of these young people are on the internet looking for guidance. They don't realize that's what they're doing. And they're looking for answers to questions that they have. That listening to these three, like, you can with confidence know that these men love sincerely and truly. Though you may have never met them, the words that they're sharing are from a place of the truest kind of love, the sincerest kind of compassion, and that you can, because of the clarity, because of the courage of the words, you can glean from that, you can learn from that, and you can begin to develop in ways that you just never imagined that you would. And so that was true for me in my 30s when I started to listen to these guys, these gentlemen, Charlie Kirk a little bit later. But again, he's part of that younger crowd, but I think an excellent mentor. And even for some of these younger men, at some point, maybe some kind of father figure, but yeah, I love that the sincerity, and that these men actually do love. They loved their families. They love those around them, and you can trust that though they've never met you, that they love you, and that they want you to know Christ, and they want you to have a relationship with Him. They want to see you in eternity at some point. And so, that can begin now. And so, yeah, thank you, Sam, for having this conversation. I really wanted to talk about this in that context, and for the young people, because working with them here, I see them on the internet and all of the different, the college campus, especially with the Charlie Kirk situation. I mean, the conversation that's happening around, the 17 to 25-year-olds, it's just all over the place, and it's big right now.
Yeah.
So how do you, in our small way, from our little corner of the world, how do we try to bring some truth and some clarity into that conversation that is, helpful for even young person who might get an opportunity to hear this. But I know I respect and admire these men greatly, and I look forward to meeting them one day, which is just a wild thought that I'll get to meet them one day. You got to meet a couple of them, but yeah. So I just really wanted to. I'm encouraged by their lives, by the words that they've shared. They've done a lot for me, and they don't even know. I'm sure they know now, at some in some way, shape, or form. But anyway, all right, man. Any closing thoughts? Any final? Any? I don't know. You got anything else?
Yeah, just that if these men, I just see a lot of hope in that. You know what? They're just normal men. They weren't perfect. They're just normal men who decided to live a life of, clarity, courage, and I'm forgetting. What was the third one?
Oh, what's the third? Compassion, clarity, and courage.
There you go. That's it. Compassion. I forget. That means I'm not very compassionate. That's why I forgot about it. But yeah, they just lived exemplary lives full of all these traits that emulate, who Christ is. And look at the blessing that they have been to so many people. That's what's so encouraging to me. And not all of us can have the same impact. But and you said it, the thing about them that was universal, they loved their wives and children. And the whole world will remember them for everything else, but their families will remember them for even more precious things. And that can be true for us too. You can live a life that will, just be a blessing to your family, so we can reverse the difficulties that we went through. And they all did that, especially Voddie Baucham. And we can be a great example to others as well, too, the way that they are to us.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that, and just we'll link a couple of there's a couple of sermons that I've heard, and if you have any recommendations, we'll link them in the notes, so that if anyone's watching this, they have somewhere to start, somewhere to begin with some of the sermons and teachings that they've had. But all right, Sam, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Fathered is a production of the nonprofit ReWritten. To learn more about ReWritten, you can visit rewritten.org.